When people go, why me? Like, the self-pity, the mantra that, that we all experience at one point in our lives. But the people like you who can say, like, why not me? And really, really take the reins. And I think people almost, it is divine, chosen for a certain calling. And it has nothing to do with where you are in your life. All of a sudden, something happens. And some people sink and some people sail. And you're like a person that's sailing, and that might have been your darkest moment. And look what it's given you. So from the darkest dark comes the lightest light.
Well, and I also think, too, it's important to acknowledge, like, even a couple of years ago, I was in a different place all over again. Like, I've been doing this for 7 years, but I had some kind of, like, I had attacks coming from a personal standpoint, from a family standpoint, and I wasn't dealing with them well. And it was weird because it's like I hadn't felt that way for years and years and years since I was in my teens and having been diagnosed recently at that point. So I just didn't expect to feel that way again. So I think everybody assumes that our journeys are like have to be this beautiful, lovely upward hill and this linear path. And it's like, no, it's a bunch of loops, and sometimes you go totally backwards. And I did. I went and sought help because I was like, I am not in a place that I feel empowered anymore. I don't even know what I'm writing and saying. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about who I am. Like, it was awful. And I was really very, like, I kind of went all the way back to those teenage years of after having gotten diagnosed. And so I think it's important to point that out, and this is very true too with addiction and things like that as well. I mean, you can fall off the wagon, but you can get right back on again. I mean, and we beat ourselves up once we've fallen, and like, you just want we want it to be perfection, or I'm a perfectionist. So I do. So having I've recently quit smoking cigarettes, and
good for you.
But it's not easy. And I'm sorry.
How long?
Oh, just in the last couple of months, and I've broken that quit twice. So, okay. But after I do, it's like for the 24 hours afterwards, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm awful, and now I'm starting all over.
It's like that relapse mode.
Oh, it's awful.
I fucked up.
Yes, but it's like,
how could I do this?
No, you need to. Right. And it's like, no, I was trying to have this perfect date of when I stopped, and then I would be able to say it was this many days on this date, and I had it all planned out on my calendar, and then I just fucked up. And so
I got sober 2 days after Christmas 13 years ago, and then that May I was able to quit smoking for good. And it took me a while to actually have that last one, right? That period of time there. But I'm as proud of that as I am everything else.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough. It's tough because it's not something, especially for me, it wasn't a daily habit. It's just situational and social, and especially as soon as you add booze into the mix. And so it's been one of those things where I'm like, but that doesn't fit with what I want going forward. And I just the health and my outcome. And anyway,
I can't even be around. I mean, it's so disgusting right now, cigarettes to me. And I was just like, people used to say that to me, and I'm going like, really, get over it, man. I mean, holy mackerel, man. But I get it now because I'm just repulsed by it. It's not like there's nothing. If somebody's really attractive and she's smoking, I'm not like, I can't even look. That cigarette thing, it's just really, it's that overwhelming to me right now. It's just, I guess it's what it represents. And without getting too analytical about it, it's just, I hated the fact that I smoked what I did.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Like I mean, my mom smoked for years, and I used to send her pictures of charred lungs, and I used to run her cigarettes under the sink. And it wasn't until, so here's what's interesting, right? And here's, did I have herpes at this point? No, I didn't have herpes yet. I hadn't contracted herpes, but I was just trying, trying to get out of my house because my parents' house was not very good and safe and healthy at that point in time. And so I was out and about, getting into trouble, bored, basically. I always got straight A's and didn't have to do shit for them. I was really lucky that way. And so I was spoiled, and so all I did was just mess around, basically. Like, what trouble can I get into? Who can I hang around with that's going to have something fun to do and get me out of this home and whatever. And so I was with my boyfriend at the time. We had tried pot. Well, he had smoked pot already. And then I try it. And then afterwards, he lights up a cigarette. And I was like, ew, like, you smoke? And oh no, and why? And this is so bad. And he said to me, well, it gives you a better buzz. It makes your buzz more, and it increases your buzz. And at the time,
there you go. There's a reason to do it.
But it works for me because it didn't occur to me that nicotine has its own buzz. So naturally, if you smoke for the first time, you're going to get this little heady buzz or whatever from the nicotine. So of course, it's going to add to the stoner buzz that I've already got going on or whatever. And so I tried it, and then from there it was curtains. And years later, it was still one of those things that was always coupled with something else. And if I'm not drinking and somebody smokes, it smells awful to me. It's disgusting. And I'm like, what? Why am I doing this then? Like, why is this draw? But it's just something that situationally it was a habit. And see, now I can start talking about it past tense, but I don't even feel that confident about it that way. So I'm working there.
Hey, listen, it's all good. You know what? Yeah. I got to the point where I would have one, and then then the next day I would go like, what did that do for me? Like, I didn't get what I was looking for, but I only had one. So all I got to do is get past that moment. Now I've got it down to that. If I can't do this, I'll never get this. So I had to finally, literally step on it and cry, like that, put this habit behind me for good. Because it was really a habit for me. It wasn't like, I wasn't doing it for nicotine. I was doing it. I used to smoke crack and just go through 3 packs of cigarettes in like a couple of hours. Like just like a freak, I mean, so that's what it represented to me. And then you wind up in a rehab with a bunch of everybody else is doing it and everybody's smoking. And I'm in this place. And I just, I really don't want to be here. But here I am. I did this, And so it just, whatever. Then it became a social, It was just, it contradicted so many other parts of my life. And you got to make decisions.
Right, exactly. It totally contradicts. And that's, the same for me. Like, I'll go weeks without smoking. And then all of a sudden, if I'm around the right person or doing the right thing, I could smoke a pack in a night. And of course, you feel like butt afterwards.
You want to hear something? I have this thing called cardiomyopathy. And are you familiar with it? Okay. So my cardiologist, I had to talk with him, and I go, can I ask you, is this from Coke? He goes, I doubt it, because Coke will fuck your heart up, but if it doesn't pop your heart and you stop, your heart gets back, and it comes back, it rejuvenates and everything. He's good. He goes, smoking is what does it. Cigarettes are way worse.
Wow.
And I was like, really? I go, okay, what if you were smoking the Coke? And everything changed on him. He's like, what? Just saying, that's what you're dealing with, Doc. I'm just saying,
Right.
Let me ask you about North Carolina now, because, this subject in that part of this country, I mean, this is the state where they wanted to not let transgenders use a bathroom. And they make it like, hey, this is what we're about, man. We're not letting them in. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. They made such a fuss.
Yep.
About and it's about this is the problem I have with religion. Religion is not about inclusion. It's about exclusion. It's like, this is where we are. And if you're not here, because they're not where we are, you see? So it's not like you can dance in and out. Like, they and I just think it's why? It's about power. It's about ego. It's about all this other shit. Conformity. It's just like, fuck all of that.
It's very much about power.
Control.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Control.
So when you're in the Deep South now, it's very, very different. I lived in Atlanta for a while, so I have my own experience with it. I noticed different. I met the warmest, most hospitable people maybe ever. I mean, unbelievably, would give you their, the keys to their home, like on an introduction. That nice and warm and mean. Other people were fucking mean, man. You were
Oh yeah.
you're a Yankee, and it was like it was on from the minute I opened my mouth.
I
You
bet
knew
too.
where not to go quick.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And
It's night and day. It's like hot and cold. I mean, that's really the best way to describe it. People are either very receptive and like, oh my gosh, thank you, and this is so needed, and the work you're doing is really great and important and whatever, or they're like, you're basically the devil.
but would you say? I mean, what you do is considered a very liberal approach
Mhm.
to something that people. It really doesn't matter what your political affiliations are. It doesn't matter what your religion affiliation is. I mean, thank God for somebody like you that is not going to judge anybody on any of that. It's not like you're saying you're open to whoever needs your help.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't care what background, religion,
But why
whether
can't
you're
everybody
modest
just
and
appreciate
conservative.
that?
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it because modesty, conservatism empowers some. Liberalism and a lack of modesty empowers some, I mean, I don't care if you want to be naked or cover your whole body and post it all over or not post ever or not have any social media
Right.
or not ever have sex with anyone ever in the world. I mean, it just doesn't matter. It's like I want people to feel good about the choices that they're making so that they can discern what is going to be best for them and they can make that decision to have that conversation with their partners. And like, that's it. That's simply it. Whatever that decision might be, it's none of my business unless you want to share it. And if you have questions or want help, happy to discuss it. But
We
other
need
than
to
that,
clone you. This is what we need to do, Janelle. We need to clone you, and we need to make one for everyone that doesn't get you. We need to pair them up with you.
As long as I don't have to deal with a clone of me, then that'd be great because I would drive myself batshit crazy. Can you
So
imagine?
no, I could. That's a good one. No, I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine me being with myself.
Right. Right.
No. So now, where you are in your life, right? Have you found that your views of sexuality, not just behaviorally, but overall, like whatever sexuality is to you, has that been altered for the better, for the worse, or how by your experience, the whole experience, like everything that's ever happened to you, your whole experience?
That's a really good question. In some ways, it's made it harder because now I expect more out of my partners, or I don't settle if something isn't working, or it's not enjoyable, or I don't feel that there's an intimate connection. And so maybe in some ways it's complicated it, but I also feel more empowered. I feel stronger about advocating for myself and about saying what my yeses and nos are and what I'm interested in. And actually, and then on the other side too, it's really helped too, because even as much as I would have liked to have said 7 years ago when I started the STD project, as much as I would have liked to have said that I was like at this fully holistic, empowered place, it's amazing how far even my perspective has been broadened and how much more my language and how much I actually still
Since
had.
that point?
Yes, I had
Yeah.
still assumptions and prejudices that I didn't even realize, like misogynistic things that I was like, a man should do this, or this is a guy's job, or silly stuff that it's like you don't even realize comes out of your mouth, or that you even are thinking it and then especially saying it. And I didn't realize I was doing it, or that that was even part of my own dogma. So in that sense, I think it's much better. At least I try to be empathetic. On good days, I'm empathetic, and some days, you just get angry and try and fight the system a little bit. And but that's okay too, because I feel strong enough to do that. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't get me down for a long period of time. Like maybe I'll have a day where it just is depressing me or frustrating me, but it doesn't get me down for like the duration that it used to. And so to that end, it has to be an improvement. That's the only way I can look at it, is like all of these experiences, good and bad, help to weave our narrative, our fabric, and who we are. And I think everything broadens us, even the trauma, even the negative. Now that's not going to help anybody who's in trauma or experiencing a lot of pain at this moment, because hearing that like, oh, it's all for a good reason and it's all going to help in the end or whatever, like that's certainly not practical or helpful. But now that I'm not in that place, I can say, like, in some respects, I wouldn't take it back. Like, if I could cure herpes, though, here's what's interesting. If I could cure it, if I could not have the STI, because I get active outbreaks. Some people never get outbreaks at all, but I do get outbreaks. And so the outbreaks are like a nuisance. They're uncomfortable. They're not lovely, but they're whatever. If I could cure it without there being any side effects, then I totally would. But would I take back the experience of having gone through the trauma,
wow,
learning who is good for me, around me, friends and family alike, and now also having been able to help all the thousands of people, and then to receive the help in return, like how much that has benefited me, you can't even quantify it. So would I take that back? Definitely not.
Yeah, and you don't get it without that. This term that I always hear, and it just, the first time I heard it, I was like, I love that term. Goddess warrior, warrior goddess, you know. It just, because it kind of, it captures everything. You know, that a woman can be a woman and have that fire, which is probably considered the masculine, but it's that balance of the masculine and feminine that makes someone complete, right? This lady Tao, she's a yoga teacher, and I go see her as often as I can because I love her. She's just great. She's 100 years old, and she's so fierce, you know. And I call her the gentle warrior because she's fierce in such a gentle way. She's just really, she's not giving up, you know. If you tell her she can't do it, she will do that very thing, whatever that is. And for the reason
I admire that kind of energy. The people who are fierce in a gentle way, like I'm fierce in a fierce way. like I'm not going to fuck around.
I know what you're saying, but you are, I feel the compassion. And that is beautiful. You know what I mean? Like the compassion that it's on another level. I mean, you know, that's a tough place somebody's in when you're going to go and touch them and help them through a real, you know. So all of this is to get to this point about like the teens. When you see, have you ever had one of these like teenage? You deal with a lot of teenagers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had one of these situations where you knew that you were really making a difference, and you were the one they're going to, and you know that, like, not in a grandiose way, but you just know that they're counting on you, they're leaning on you, and then get recognized by the parents, like you know, thank you for helping my child.
I think ultimately just getting that interaction, it's trust again, you know, somebody is trusting you with something that, like intimate details and like very personal perspectives.
Yeah.
That aren't easy to talk about and are embarrassing oftentimes, and back to that shame and fear that we were originally talking about. So if somebody, a young person, a young adult opens up and then does share, it's like it's those times are beautiful. It's lovely. It's lovely all around, no matter who it is, no matter what age demographic. Because usually it's somebody who hasn't told this to anybody else or talked about it with anyone else.
It's just that when you can get them young and you can empower somebody that could very easily get lost right there. They're at that crossroads, and instead of falling apart, you can put them together. You can let them put themselves together. I know in sobriety, man, when I see these young kids, I know how hard that is when you still think you're invincible, and look at them old fuckers here trying to tell me what I can't do. I mean, come on. It's so hard to reach them, but when you reach one, man, wow, is it great.
The same applies for sexual health. Like, it is proven, research has proven that, so there's two different kinds of camps in terms of sexual health education. And one is the abstinence only based camp, which is a lot of fear mongering, and it's a lot of cultural control, like don't have sex because you might get pregnant or you're going to get an STI. So it's this whole fear-based approach with not a lot of information on how to protect yourself.
Doesn't sound very practical either, by the way.
It's totally not practical.
Yeah.
And then there's the comprehensive sex ed, which also talks about abstinence, because technically abstinence is the only 100% safe sex, not having sex. I mean, every other partnered activity has some level of risk. So a comprehensive approach does actually state that, but then it also states that when and if you choose to become sexually active, here are the risks that you might be getting involved in, and here are the ways to reduce those risks and make the choices that are best for you. It's like this empowering approach, and it's been proven, research has proven that if you present a comprehensive approach with all of the information, that young adults will choose to have sex at a later age, and then they're often, when and if they choose to, they're often utilizing more safer sex practices than those who had an abstinence-only based education. Guess what kind of education I had?
You did mention Catholic earlier.
Yeah, abstinence only. And that's the thing. I was 16 contracting an STD, so I was one of those numbers. And it's just, it blows your mind because it's like, yeah, you can set people up to make good choices. If we could just look at it from just a basic, simple, practical way, it's like, man, we could stop so much pain and heartache and trauma and unnecessary pain and heartache, Like, let's deal with a bigger issue.
Isn't it true when it comes to STDs, though, that they can only be transmitted through saliva or bodily fluid, right?
No, skin-to-skin transmission, HPV, herpes, molluscum, scabies, pubic lice.
Whoa, easy. Oh.
Skin-to-skin transmission. So there's three different ways.
I just got hepatitis listening to that.
I know, right? So it's skin-to-skin transmission, bodily fluids like saliva or genital secretions, or cum, to not be so fancy, or a blood transmitted. So there's three different kinds of STIs that are transmitted in three different ways. And certain STIs.
So skin to skin, if there's not a incision and there's no, somebody, you can get a shaking hands? You could get, what has...
Yeah.
Come on.
HPV?
You can get from shaking hands.
Yeah. Well, okay. HPV does need an entry point into the skin. That's why a lot of people will have warts along their nail beds and things. So if you're a nail biter, you're more at risk of having warts. And HPV, the same warts. HPV is warts and or high risk strains. The low risk strains are warts. So you can have warts on your fingers, you can have warts on your toes, you can have warts on your genitals. Those are all low risk strains, meaning that they don't look delightful, but they eventually go away. And
yeah, that was delicately put. They don't look delightful.
They don't look delightful, but they're not cancer causing. So the high risk strains are skin to skin transmitted, but can cause cancer, and that's rare. But they can cause throat cancer, penile cancer, cervical cancer, so anal cancer as well too. But those infections, so that's a viral infection. There's viral, parasitic, and bacterial. That viral infection does need an entry point into the system. However, something like pubic lice just needs to touch your skin. Those are tiny little bugs. Scabies, same deal. Just needs to touch your skin. Also tiny little bugs. Those are parasites. Parasites are a little more easily transmitted, and they don't need an entry point, so to speak. They just need skin-to-skin contact. Molluscum's another one. You see some of these infections. Pubic lice you can also get in your facial hair if you've got a beard or a mustache. And you see some of these infections also in child care centers and in young children. Like molluscum is one that if it's not an adult.
How would a child get that?
So children just transmit it because it's a viral infection, and it often is, they'll have a parent who is hugging them, doing changing their diapers, whatever, just bathing, whatever, skin to skin contact between a parent and a child, and then the children touching each other at a daycare center, on the playground, wherever. So it's really common in young children. When you see it in adults, it's almost always sexually transmitted, because that's how adults are touching one another more regularly than if they have a young child and their child has it. It's not necessarily a sexual thing, but it was transmitted by skin-to-skin contact. So so there are infections that you can get just by touching one another, but not a lot of them. Most of them need an entry point. They need even the skin-to-skin transmitted. So herpes is a skin-to-skin transmitted infection, but
you have to be bleeding or something, right?
No, it needs to be exposed to a mucous membrane or a small tiny cut and tear. So if I have an outbreak, I get outbreaks on my butt cheek. So if I just touch my outbreak with my hand, I do always wash my hands if I happen to touch it. But if I touched it and didn't wash my hands, I also wouldn't have herpes on my hands. And because your skin is a natural barrier. However, we have mucous membranes in a lot of different parts of our body. We have mucous membranes in the vagina and the vulva, the head of the penis, our ears, nose, and mouth, our eyes, our anus. And so all of those places are more susceptible and are susceptible to skin-to-skin transmitted infections and all infections. Mucous membranes is just a fancy way of saying porous skin, and that porous skin is meant to trap unwanted pathogens. It's actually a barrier. Most people feel exactly the way you do. I mean, they just don't even get it. And that's why it's like when you tell people that all sex has some level of risk, they're like, come on, you're just trying to scare us. I'm like, no, there's actually true risk for different levels of risk and depends on which body parts we're talking about. And we won't go into that because that does get nuanced. I was on a podcast a while ago and the person asked like, okay, tell me about risk. And it was so broad. And I was like, what do you want to know? Like if you have to be specific about which body parts are getting involved, whether there are fluids involved, which activities you're engaging in, like there is a different level of risk for all of that. And most people will say like, well, can't you give me like a rough percentage? What are my chances of contracting herpes? And again, I'm like, it's different for every activity. It's different for every body part. So if you're a male having sex with a male or two women or whatever, I mean, two women identifying people or two people with vulvas and vaginas. I mean, you can go on and break it down. I'm like, this is why there aren't any numbers out there. There really aren't. There's not a list of statistics. You can just kind of put it on a continuum basis. Like certain things are riskier. There are ways in which to reduce risk if you're engaging in certain body parts with certain activities. But from that, there's no specific, my cat's wanting to get in the picture. From there, it's like there's no actual specific percentage because there's so much nuance. There's so many variables that come into play. We're humans. I mean, it's not a perfect science.
Yeah, but if the person that your partner is not infected with an STD, you can't get one from them. Is that am I safe in saying that?
Well, you don't actually know if they're not infected because even if they were just say they were tested yesterday, right? Then when you get like an STI panel, if you go out to a clinic, your public health department, even at your doctor's office, like a full panel, if you say, I want to be tested for everything, test me for everything you can possibly test me for. They usually test for about 5 to a max of 10 infections, but most doctor's office won't test up to 10. It's usually about like 5, maybe 6 infections. There are 30 plus STIs. So you're only being tested for common ones and ones that are easily testable. So like if you're a person with a penis, if you're a male identifying person who has a penis, you can't be tested for high risk HPV. You actually can't be tested for HPV at all. Men can't be tested for HPV. And
men can carry and pass that.
Oh yeah, and then it can turn into cancer and/or warts depending on whether it's low risk or high risk. And
for the male and the female.
Yeah, yep, either one. So 80% of all people will contract HPV at some point in their lives.
How many?
No, it's 80%. No exaggeration. 80% of all people will contract HPV. Most will clear it on their own and never even know they had the infection.
So is this like cancer? If you come down with one of these things where you can starve of cancer, you can actually, like, if you get into a real alkaline diet, can you cure yourself?
Yeah, HPV, molluscum. What are some other ones? There are a couple of others that our bodies do eventually attack and clear on their own. And then you don't have the infection anymore. And it's not transmittable to anybody else. So HPV is one of them. And so
it's not dormant where it can pop back up again. It's cured.
Now, that's the problem. You don't always know for sure. So like they say approximately let's just do HPV right now.
You're the bearer of some bad news today, though. I'm telling you.
The deal is it's like it's a reality for the majority of people. And that's what it's like. It doesn't even have to be bad news. It's more like we should all just be like, oh, yeah, well, I'm probably going to contract an STI. Hopefully, it'll be something that's curable or treatable and not that big of a deal. And we're just going to talk about it from a practical perspective. Like, again, nobody wants it. I get it. Yes, it's like 6 months to 2 years, anywhere from 6 months to 2 years based on your immune system. So yes, if you can get your immune system, however you want to apply it and do that, and maybe it's being fully alkaline. If you can get your immune system, just running well, then you are likely to clear it quicker. But anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And you don't know, there's no way to test. Like So there's the only way to know if you have HPV and you're a person with a penis, a male identifying person with a penis, or anyone with a penis, actually. The only way to know is if you have
politically correct we have to be, a male identifying person with a penis.
because you could be female identifying but have a penis, and that if that's the case, you can't be tested. The only way to know for sure is if you have warts, if you're getting low risk strains, which are the warts, and if you can see warts. And so the warts may go away and then they may come back 6 months later, unfortunately. So you don't 100% know until it's been like a fairly significant amount of time that, okay, yep, I'm not getting them back again. My body's fought off the virus. Same with the high-risk strains. There's actually no way to know about the high-risk strains. You can't be tested if you have a penis. So, but you can definitely transmit it to other people, and that may cause cervical cancer if you're with a person with the cervix and with a vagina, or it could cause throat cancer if it's oral sex. But those are rare cases. I mean, very rarely does it actually turn into cancer. So many people contract it, but very, very few ever have any complications or issues as a result. So that's the good news, is that most people's bodies fight it on their own. And
that's good news. Okay. I don't want to hear the bad news. I definitely am not ready for that.
I know. But I'm telling you, like, that's the thing, is it's shocking to you. And this is information that I feel like we should be giving all of our young adults, all of the humans in the world. Like, this is just what is likely to happen. And it doesn't mean stop having sex. Like, rock your sex out. Go enjoy that. Do whatever you feel like doing, then that's good and consensual.
Just have a doctor on standby.
It's just know that this is likely, and that's right. So that was HPV we were talking about. That's one infection out of their over 30, according to the World Health Organization. So, and you can only get tested regularly for about 4 to 6. If you do online testing, which is expensive, so you have to have the financial resources to do it, it usually is pretty expensive. You can get tested for like 10 to 12 infections, but that's the max. And that's still, again, there's like 30 infections. Now, some are really rare and some are more prevalent in certain countries and things like that. So that's still worthwhile of saying and pointing that out. Like, all 30 aren't everywhere all the time.
The last time we spoke, I said that I was actually proud of the fact that I've never come down with one of these things, right? And I thought, like, that's a really stupid thing to say to somebody, like I was just being honest in my ignorance and saying it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you've completely stripped me from that. Who knows the fuck I got? Like, I'm why? Because I'm alive. That's why. Yeah, because I'm not dead.
You probably had an STI. You probably have. I was speaking at a...
Listen, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. I'm sorry.
I spoke at a conference a while ago, and there was a rapper on stage. Jacques was his name, and he was saying that too. He kept saying over and over to the audience, "Oh, I don't have anything, but I feel this way about testing, and I get tested and whatever." And finally, I grabbed the mic, and because we were all just taking turns conversating, it was an open panel discussion. And finally, I said, "You don't know that you don't have anything. You can't know." So he didn't like that. Twitter blew up, and they were like, "Oh no, she didn't. She just said he had an STI." And I was like, "No, I don't know for sure either. Nobody knows. I mean, we don't know.
You know something,
okay.
There's this stigma with it. So just doing this interview with you, I'm thinking, anybody that watches this is going to assume, like, why is he talking to her? Like, this is my, like, listen, I have a warped, sick mind, so I'm always thinking about shit that is meaningless and serves me no fucking purpose. But I always got to pull myself back from these ridiculous places my mind goes, right? But I'm thinking people are just going to assume that the reason I'm talking to her is because somehow I found you because I have some kind of thing. So, like, I'm doing this, I'm copying to something here in a kind of cheap, sneaky kind of way. And
what's so funny that's about why that is that's exactly why on our social media channels we have a very small amount of followers in comparison to
nobody wants their name attached to it, right?
Here's what's crazy though. So we get 90,000 views per week. So 90,000
nameless views.
Exactly. And then with all of my social media channels, I might have like 18,000 now total people or something like that. But we're hitting like 250,000, more than 250,000 every month, So it's like, obviously that's how pervasive the stigma is. But here's what's funny about it is if you had a person on your show who was a part of the Wounded Warrior Project, or someone from the Susan B. Komen Foundation, nobody would automatically assume, oh, you must have had breast cancer too. Oh, you must be a veteran with PTSD or a disability. Nobody makes that assumption, but the fear or the concern about even liking, supporting, advocating for, even talking to someone
Yes.
who's doing STI
Yeah.
work, they're like, oh, everyone's going to assume I have an STI. And it's like that speaks to how bad the
Because
stigma
of the
is.
stigma that attaches to it, right?
Yes. You know, I talk a lot about it's important that we don't co-opt movements. That's kind of a new thing that's come up is people have been co-opting movements. So we're working at the STD Project, and then I also am the founder of the Herpes Activist Network, HANDS, which is 25 activists who are open
Hands.
about their status.
Herpes Activist Network.
It's called HANDS, and yes.
That's the way to
And
not
it
get herpes, I guess, right? Yeah.
right.
Okay. Makes
It
sense.
stands for Herpes Activists Networking to Dismantle Stigma. And we all
Wow.
talk about how, and a lot of people have called sharing your status publicly like coming out, but we're trying not to use that language intentionally because coming out is really associated with the LGBT
Right,
group.
right.
However, what's interesting is I liken a lot of like where the movement is at and how it may take a certain amount of time to the work that LGBTQ folks have done. Now, there's so much more work that needs to be done because there's still massive stigma associated with being LGBTQ. However, like 30 years ago, nobody knew anyone who was LGBTQ. Like if you would
Right.
ask somebody, do you know anyone who's gay? They would have been like, no, like ew, or that's awful or bad or sinful or whatever it was. In reality, there probably were tons of people that were gay. They just weren't out. So I feel like the work that we're doing around STIs is very similar. Right now, it's very easy to categorize people all into one group and say, oh, you're all dirty, nasty, horse sluts, damaged goods, trash, tainted, so on and so forth, because everybody thinks that there isn't anyone that they know. They don't know anyone with an STI. So nobody that they know or associates with is those kinds of things.
Doesn't
But as
apply,
soon
right?
Yes, and as soon as you start talking to people, like same deal with all my friends and family, like it's changed their perspective entirely because it's like, oh wait, we love Jenelle, we think she's cool, or we respect her, or whatever it is, whatever their feelings are about me. Now it's like, wait a minute. So we can't lump everybody in this category into these negative boxes because we love somebody in that group. So everybody can't all be bad and crappy, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take similar, maybe less, because now our social media, our reach in terms of the internet and stuff like that is different than it was 30 years ago when, like in the 80s, late 70s and 80s and stuff when LGBT and things where people really were starting to come out, especially in the 90s and stuff. But I don't think it'll take quite as much time, but I liken it in terms of like, that's the steps in which like the process that it's going to have to go through. Like we're going to have to know more people. We're going to have conversations, whether it's just within our friends and family network or whether it's publicly like I'm doing, so that people can say, wait a minute, somebody who I know has herpes, like my professor, my best friend, my cousin, people that I love and care about. So all people with herpes can't be all bad and trashy and promiscuous or
Hey,
whatever
why'd you
it
have
is.
some HPV?
Right. Exactly. Like it's not so bad. Join the club. And the club is so big.
No, you know what? I give you a lot of credit because you're so in the moment with it. Like there's no pretense about anything. Like you're right here. You're so yourself. With everything being with that's authentic. I have so many women on that they're healers or light workers, and they have so many different terms for the different things they do. So much of the trauma that people are trying to come out of, and they seek all kinds of avenues to go, to expand, right? It's blocks somewhere. And this is a self-imposed block. The blocks come from how we're conditioned, and the stigma that these words carry to them, the judgment that it brings with it, and we develop this persona based on this block, this secret, or whatever it is, often the case, right? The fact that you can just be yourself, it gives so much hope to somebody else. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's an addiction, whether it's an STD, or it's whatever kind of trauma a person went through, to let it go, be honest, talk about it. It really, my experience is it comes to owning your truth, whatever it is. You can't be free until you own your truth. You know, wholly.
100%. And it's easier said than done. I mean, like you said, it's
sure
secrets,
is.
you know? I
Yeah.
mean, and again, it's like beating this poor dead little horse over there, but shame, you know? And that's all it
It's
is.
not
It's
a
like,
poor little horse. It's a monster. You
it is a
kidding me?
monster. That's true. That's true. It is. And because it doesn't help that everyone sees our highlight reel too. We're always seeing everyone's highlight reel. Like, people are struggling. They're just not posting and talking about it. And even what I post is very much cultivated toward the messaging and the work that I'm doing now. It didn't always used to be that way. It used to be I just posted whatever the fuck was on my mind at the moment. And in some ways it still probably feels that way, because sometimes it's pretty blatant or out there. I'm just, you know, whatever. But it's a lot more curated intentionally for the specific work that I'm doing now. I do try my best to be as authentic and open and to not have anything to feel shameful and hide. And sometimes it's even like you may actually feel shameful about it, but just putting it out there is that first step of like, oh, wait, the reaction that I assumed was going to come from this is not the reality. Again, how I feel about something isn't necessarily the reality. And it's a real feeling, but it might not be a reflection of what's really truly happening and how it's all going to turn out. So I'm still working on it, though. As long as we don't stop and sit there for too long, I think that's the key, you know, and I've done that. I mean, like I said, it was a little more than a year ago, almost 2 years ago, I was just truly stuck, and I was stuck for a minute. I was stuck for a good 9 months, almost a year, in which I didn't have it. I didn't have the energy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was really encumbered by words and people around me. And I started to let that seep in and let that change how I viewed myself all over again. And I didn't even think I would do that. I thought I was so enlightened and in this lovely place that I wouldn't ever revert. And it's like, no, I sure as hell did. I went right backward to feeling like that small teenager little person again. And like, I've kind of vowed this, it's been about 9 months now since I've decided, like, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it is I need to do. I'm going to continue this work and fight in the way that I see is best. And if somebody has a problem with it, like, bye, Felicia. There's the door.
I think the world of you for what you're doing. I really do. Your honesty is bravery squared.
I don't see it as much as bravery as much as like it was a necessity. It was either this or be lost for the rest of my life, you know?
That's why it's bravery, because you don't even see it as that. You know, you're going to take the hits for other people because you're getting ridiculed. You know, come on. If anybody took the time to get to know you, how could they possibly ridicule you? But
it's a good question, but I think I'm sure there are some with some interesting opinions otherwise, but that's okay, because in that sense, I've said this a couple of times to friends and family, and I think it's an acceptance and necessary. Like, I am a polarizing kind of person. People either decide that they love me and love what I'm doing or my energy and what I have to say, or they hate me. And that's okay, because I don't need everybody in the whole world to love me. I just need to know that what I'm doing is worthwhile to at least one person. And I know that it is, so that in and of itself makes it worth it. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, right? Is that the cliche?
That. Yeah.
So if I got to break a few eggs, oh well, I'm going to eat well in the end. So that's good. Good for me and good on me.
Janelle, you are what the world needs more of. I really want.
Likewise. I think authentic meets authentic today.
Oh, well, I'm on it. From you, that means everything. May not be so accurate, but you know.
No, to come out and talk about addiction in the way you do, and to share your story, and to be very transparent about it, that's not easy to do. I mean, I'm still working on some of my own cruxes in that ways, like I was talking about smoking and stuff. And I'm just at the very beginning of that, and I'm not really sure even the language. Like, is it past tense? Is it current? You know, stuff like that. I mean, little stuff, and just owning your story and your experience, bad and good, is like, that helps other people to do the same. You open up space for everybody else. I mean, that to me is just as important.
It's a lot better place that I'm in now than I was. So yeah.
That's how we honor our time.
That's right. We're not time bandits here. We honor the time. Well, listen, I really want to say thank you very much, and I'm really grateful, and I would like to do this with you again real soon. How would anybody that would have any questions for you or want to seek your help in any way, how do they contact you?
I'm on all of social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm also at the stdproject.com, so that's the main website, or positivesingles.com. All of them, you'll be able to find me.
Okay. I have a feeling there'll be people trying to find you.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
You're the best.